Welcome to you all. Today we are going to hear about an interesting study our colleague from Birmingham University recently conducted it. As you know, foster care is part of the DI process in this country, and it is combined with different community-based services for support of families and children. I'd like to thank Sarah Todorov. She is finishing her postdoctoral studies and postgrad. And thank you very much, Sarah, for presenting your work to the Bulgarian audience, to the Know-How Center. She is interested in inclusive education, foster care, and education of children from Eastern Europe who have special education needs and children with disabilities. Sarah was also part of a research effort with the Center for Applied Studies for Vulnerable Children, Families, and for the help of children orphans. And together with other scientists, she studied what makes globally place children in some other care, and she also studied alternative caregivers, young caregivers, and Sarah is also qualified child teacher. And she's working currently on another project in the UK. This project is about assessing a computerized system for training of attention with autistic kids. And today Sarah is going to tell us about her study on the experience of foster parents of children with disabilities in this country, in Bulgaria. Before I hand over to her, let me give you some numbers. A snapshot. This is from the report of the Social Assistance Agency 2020 report. It's very interesting. Let's see what it says. Between 2016 and 2021, foster care delivered by municipalities under the auspices of municipalities, we have 183 children with disabilities. And in 2021, the average monthly number of children in foster care for municipalities is more than 1,700, and less than 200 of those are with disabilities. I think this shows, on the one hand, the problem with very, very low number of children with disabilities in foster care. On the other hand, in the past 2 years, it indicates that in the past 2 years, we are seeing specific efforts to promote the number, to have more foster families for such children. So I would be very, very happy if today we, the representatives of the agency, chime in order to comment on this, to see what would help them and where they see difficulties. Now I'm handing over to Sarah. Sarah?
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Elisa, for the introduction. And I have to agree with you in what you've just said, that today I'm going to present about some academic research which has been done on this topic of foster care for children with disabilities in Bulgaria. But in the second half of this webinar today, what I'm really interested to hear about is people who are working in this field at different levels, what your opinions are, not just about the research, but about this topic of foster care in general, to share commentary and expertise and knowledge and questions, so we can all engage together. So I'm very aware that while I've been doing research on this topic, there are a number of people in the room today who have their own expertise, which will be interesting to hear about as well. So let me begin. As Litsa said, my name is Sarah Todorov. I'm a postgraduate researcher, and I'm currently working as a research fellow at the University of Birmingham in the UK. My professional background is as a teacher. Yeah, today I'm presenting these findings from this doctoral research study, and I'm really pleased to see so many people here to who've joined this webinar and who are engaging with this very important topic, and which is currently obviously very important in Bulgaria. Just a few words about my motivation to engage with this topic, really. I have experience of working in a voluntary capacity with foster families and with children with disabilities in Bulgaria. And like many people here, I have been witness to the conditions in institutions and the small group homes and family type care centres. And this research really sought to contribute to the improvement of alternative care in Bulgaria, particularly for children with disabilities, who are, as we know, one of the most marginalised groups and one of the groups which are most vulnerable to placement in alternative care. So the presentation today is structured in 5 sections, and it should be about half an hour. First section, I'll be looking very briefly at the context of the study and methodology. I'll then be moving on to provide a summary of the main findings. Obviously, in such a short time, I can only go into so much detail about this research, but hopefully I can give you an overview of what were some really important, interesting themes which emerged from the research, which may be relevant to your practice. And after that, I want to discuss one of the findings in particular, which is about foster parents' competency and expertise. And at the end of the presentation, I'll be showing some recommendations which are based on the research. And these are what I would really be interested to hear comment on at the end of the webinar today. So beginning with the study context and methodology. For most participants in this webinar, the contextual challenges to foster care that are presented on this slide are well known. In brief, there are a myriad of factors which can be seen to influence the development of foster care in Bulgaria. These could be categorized according to policy level factors like deinstitutionalization, the Accept Me project, historical and cultural factors like the influences of attitudes towards disability, which continue, and the post-communist legacy of care for children. Practical challenges with training and supporting foster parents, and the availability of foster parents for caring for children with disabilities in particular. Current social political issues, which are wider than foster care, but we can see are influencing its development, like political governmental changes, the challenges of closing the remaining institutions in Bulgaria, and pressures of international criticism. Finally, we might think about the media influence, which in the past has given negative perceptions of foster care and foster parents. Since the aim of this presentation is to present findings on a recently conducted study, I won't spend more time discussing the context, but I will assume that everybody here has some level of knowledge of this, and if there's questions about the context, we can always discuss those afterwards. So this study had 2 main research questions. It was primarily interested in the development of foster care as a form of family-based alternative care in the context of deinstitutionalization. It was an exploratory research study which used qualitative and interpretative methods. This is because there is limited evidence from Bulgaria and the wider geographical region, by which I mean Eastern European region, on the practices of foster care for children with disabilities from the perspective of foster parents themselves. However, there is more evidence of social workers and medical professionals' perspectives. Therefore, this study took the position that foster parents who have experienced caring for children with disabilities already have lived experience and knowledge which help us to better understand the phenomenon and ways to improve the practice. So the main research questions therefore were: 1, how do foster parents experience caring for children with disabilities in Bulgaria? And 2, how do foster parents' experiences inform suggestions for changes to services in foster care for children with disabilities in Bulgaria? So this was a small-scale study which focused on foster parents from one region of Bulgaria. All foster parents had fostered at least one child with disabilities. Data was collected through in-depth semi-structured interviews, and these lasted between 45 minutes and 1.5 hours. In total, 6 foster parents were interviewed, and they all had experience of fostering children with disabilities. Recruiting participants for this study was quite difficult for a number of reasons. One reason being foster parents' fears about sharing their true experiences and the potential negative repercussions of that on their role, on their livelihood. And this was despite assurance that the participants' identities would be confidential and their names, location, all of these things would not be shared. So this was a big challenge. During the interviews, foster parents were asked about how they came to be a foster parent for a disabled child, what their everyday life looks like, what support they have received and what they desire to receive, what challenges they face, their interactions with medical services and the education system, their motivation to continue fostering, or in some cases, why they decided to give up fostering. Data was analysed through a method of analysis known as interpretative phenomenological analysis, or IPA. This method of analysis offers the opportunity for researchers to go beyond surface level interpretation. And at the end of this presentation, I've included some references to IPA in case you're interested to know more about this approach. Okay, so moving on now to an overview of the main findings. The findings from this study are organised into 3 thematical categories. These categories paint a picture of the shared experiences of these foster parents. First thematical category was expertise and commitment, and this focused on the way foster parents had the shared experience of developing caring expertise throughout their role and how they developed a strong sense of commitment to foster children. Second thematical category was navigating relationships and services. This category draws attention to foster parents' shared experiences relating to navigating the professional relationships involved in being a foster parent and accessing services related to children's care and education. Thirdly, the theme personal impact combines foster parents' experiences of a personal impact as a result of being a foster parent in general and as a result of fostering children with disabilities in particular. So I'm going to go into a little more depth on each of these 3 main thematical categories now, beginning with the first category, expertise and commitment. So findings from this first category demonstrated the knowledge and skills that foster parents have in order to care for children with disabilities, which can be understood as caring expertise. This thematical category had 2 sub-themes, providing special care and weight of responsibility. So the first sub-theme, providing special care, this sub-theme shows that participants gained skills throughout their fostering journey which they use to provide special care. The lived experience and observation of specialists is important for skill development, and this facilitates the development of caring expertise. For example, one participant described observing the way therapists worked with her foster child and the way the child was stimulated through the therapy environment. This foster parent adapted the child's play area at home, modelling it on what she observed at the children's centre in order to provide stimulation at home and support the child's development. Another foster parent described the way they worked alongside doctors to come up with a special diet for their foster child who was struggling with digestion issues. These examples show the types of caring activities which can be described as a special type of care. and which foster parents are actively involved in providing. Findings also show that part of providing special care is not only restricted to caring activities such as personal care and at-home therapy, but it also includes advocacy. The willingness and preparedness of foster parents to advocate for children's needs was a common experience among participants. This can thus be seen as an aspect of providing the special care children with disabilities need in foster care. A number of participants described fighting for children's needs to be met. For one participant, this meant petitioning for the child to receive the operation they needed and not resting until the operation was complete. For another, this meant ensuring that the child received the correct diagnosis in order for potential adoptive parents to have all the necessary information available when deciding whether to adopt the child. This was seen as an important activity which foster parents engaged with in order to create a secure future for their child in any way they could. However, fighting for children was not always easy according to these participants. Some participants described it as fighting windmills, an impossible fight which ultimately, for one participant, caused burnout. Findings from the second subtheme, weight of responsibility, show that foster parents feel highly responsible for their foster children. This is particularly related to children's medical or health and developmental needs. They also feel responsible for making sure children have access to educational provision which is appropriate for them. Participants were quite skeptical about reintegration with biological families, since from personal experience, they knew how hard it was to meet children's needs in the family environment with limited support and services, and identified that where biological families themselves had limited material resources, their ability to care for children was greatly reduced. Findings show that as a result of the sense of responsibility foster parents feel, they are prepared to take on tasks they are not trained for in order to meet children's needs. Some participants investigated ways to further develop their knowledge in order to meet children's needs, either through further education or training which they organised themselves. They wanted to become more proficient at caring for children, either to do with their educational or rehabilitation needs. So moving on now to the second main theme of this, which was a finding from this research, and that is about navigating relationships and services and how the foster parents did this. So within this theme, findings show that participants relied on support from family, friends, colleagues, and charities or NGOs. These personal support networks are important for foster parents to continue caring and prevent burnout. The kind of support foster parents received from these networks was both practical, involving material items, donations, and physical help, and emotional, involving friendship and advice. One participant described how, as a Roma person, they were turned away from hospitals when seeking medical attention for their foster child. But with the help from a worker from a local NGO, they were able to access these hospitals by visiting together. On the other hand, participants were disappointed by the support professionals gave them, and sometimes turned to unqualified individuals for advice, such as friends. This is a concern, particularly when considering the provision of high-quality care for children in foster care in Bulgaria. Participants highlighted the need for provision of formal support services to help them to continue fostering. This included short-term, hourly or daily respite opportunities and access to knowledgeable individuals to help them with understanding children's medical needs. One participant described how difficult it was to complete everyday tasks, like going to the dentist or local shops. She had been told to leave a supermarket once due to her foster child with special needs making too much noise and disturbing the other shoppers. This made her feel very awkward about being present in the community and limited the activities she could complete. In addition to this, findings show that foster parents feel powerless regarding their job security, employment rights, and transitions to new foster children. They feel unheard despite knowing foster children intimately and having suggestions to make about children's care and future. One participant described feeling obsolete, like a silent letter, never being asked their perspective on decisions regarding the child, and being treated just like a service, not a person. In terms of finance, participants were aware of others' perceptions about foster parents being financially motivated or money grabbers and actively resisted this. Some admitted that they fostered primarily as a form of employment, explaining that everyone has to work and earn money. However, across all participants, altruistic motivation was prevalent. Findings show that not all participants were clear about their role in the reintegration of children with biological parents, and some had experienced distressing situations during this process. There was a general preference for adoption for children with disabilities instead of reintegration. Some participants described feeling very wary of biological parents, particularly of their behaviour and the effect they had on children. For example, deliberately telling children to misbehave when with their foster parent. Finally, in this theme, participants reported relationship fragmentation with social workers and a sense of social workers being invested less in relationships and more in administrative tasks. One participant viewed her social worker as focused on asking questions in order to fill in the paperwork, not on asking questions in order to find out how she was and what support she needed. Okay, so the third theme from this research, which I'm going to talk about, is this theme of personal impact. And this theme again has a number of sub-themes which you can see on the screen. Perhaps surprisingly, this theme, personal impact, is not only confined to negative experiences, but foster parents also experienced a positive effect on their personal life as a result of fostering children with disabilities. Fostering caused participants to change their mindsets on disability and caused them to discover new passions. Fostering brought an unexpected richness to their lives. One participant experienced personal growth from this work, and another explained how their dream of looking after and helping children was fulfilled through fostering. This was an interesting finding which demonstrated the positive side of fostering, which is not often spoken about. The greatest emotional challenge participants had was separating from children at the end of the foster placement. Receiving new children can feel overwhelming, especially children with complex needs that the foster parent has not come across before. For example, one participant described the separation as a bitter taste which lingers in one's mouth. It is difficult to quickly forget foster children, and as human beings, foster parents continue with the memory of their child for a long time. However, guidance and support from professionals alleviates this feeling of being overwhelmed. Not knowing how children are or hearing from them after they've left the foster family was a major source of stress, not only for the individual foster parent, but for the wider family who had been involved in caring for the child. One participant described dealing with the separation from the beginning by viewing the child as a temporary figure in their family for which they would care for to the best of their ability, but expecting that one day they would move on to a permanent family. They viewed their role as a step in the life of the child, and this helped them to come to terms with the separation when it occurred. Findings show that foster parents are aware of the unavoidable stress that fostering can bring to a person's life. Despite knowing this, participants felt the benefits of caring for children who were in need of family care outweighed the implications on their own lives. One example of an occupational hazard of fostering children with disabilities is the avalanche of information which is received from specialists. This too can feel overwhelming for foster parents, but is something they accept in order to do the caring work of fostering children with disabilities. Okay, so having covered in an overview these three main themes from the research, what I want to do now is focus particularly on this first theme, which was providing special care. And I want to discuss this in light of the existing literature and theory that we have about foster care from other regions around Europe and beyond, and demonstrate its applicability really to the Bulgarian context as well as other contexts. So this discussion on the foster parents' ability to provide special care for disabled children is relevant to foster families and biological families in Bulgaria, as well as to family-based care for disabled children in these other countries and contexts. This is due to the fact that findings related to foster parents' ability to provide special care for disabled children is in line with the existing research on care which has come from other European countries. Findings from this study that about providing special care show that it's a combination of expertise in everyday life and the ability to provide individualized care. So expertise in everyday life, this is a term which has emerged from the literature, which is used to describe the way individuals have the role of upbringers and are able to facilitate the socialization of children within society. In this study, findings show that participants used their expertise in everyday life through playing an important role in the socialization of children who were often previously institutionalized. Foster parents help children to form their self-identity and expose them, often for the first time, to family, friends, and community. The second aspect, providing individualized care, is described as providing care which goes beyond the basic needs of the child. This finding is in line with existing research which shows that foster parents of children with complex needs must develop skills beyond those required for normal parenting. And foster parents need support which goes beyond the remit of normal parenting in order to fulfill this role. This is also relevant for biological parents as well, who also need to develop these extra special caring skills. Providing individualized care involves inhabiting a certain mindset towards disability. Participants in this study articulated their position that children with disabilities need family care as much as children without disabilities, and that residential care is comparatively unsuitable for meeting children's needs. The term special competence, which you can see at the bottom of the screen, is a term which combines these elements of providing special care. It explains the skills and knowledge gained by parents of disabled children through being a primary caregiver for a child with additional needs. Special competence in the context of parenting disabled children, both in biological and foster families, is described as a development of considerable skills which are honed over time. These skills are developed through negotiating, advocating, and mediating for the child, the act of educating others, and resisting the dominant social order. And the reference from this is from Ryan and Brunswick Cole, and the reference will be on one of my last slides in case you're interested to read more about that. Similarities in the fine-tuning of skills are seen in the experiences of foster parents who took part in this study. Through providing individualized care, advocating for children, and inhabiting a certain mindset towards children with disabilities, the experience of fostering children with disabilities in the Bulgarian context is in part understood to be one of needing to develop special competence in order to fulfill the role and provide quality care for foster children. However, despite evidence from this study and others from other regions that parents do have the ability to provide this special care for their children, their knowledge and expertise is largely unrecognised as being of particular value compared to that of specialists, and in particular medical specialists. However, in this study, participants' experiences demonstrated that they do not feel value is placed on their work. They are not seen as making important contributions to deinstitutionalization or society, despite being the ones doing the 24/7 hour work. They are perceived as incorrectly motivated, and they are not viewed as having any professional skills. Whether foster parenting should be viewed as a professional occupation or not is a complex question, since it is a role, of course, which crosses both work and care. However, what is made clear through the findings of this study and the wider literature is that foster parents do have competence and capacity, which can be used to inform the care they provide. This finding has implications in particular for policy and practice, since it surrounds the perception of different types of parents and their ability to provide care for their children. Findings from this study show that from the perspective of foster parents, care in the family environment is possible, suitable, and preferential to care in residential settings. The implication is therefore that changes should be made towards the way parental capabilities are perceived in order to promote family-based care. Okay, so the presentation is drawing to an end now. I'm just going to look at the 3 recommendations which are made in light of this research. Okay, so the first recommendation is the need to increase access to foster care for children with disabilities as a matter of urgency in order to prevent placement in residential care and to provide family-based care alternatives for children already in residential care. This study shows that for children unable to live in their biological family, life in a foster family gives children opportunities not afforded in residential care, and foster parents are committed to children and have intimate knowledge about them, which isn't replicated in the residential care environment. Foster care should therefore be intentionally developed as a form of family-based alternative care, reducing reliance on family-type care centres for children with disabilities. Furthermore, the understanding that family-based care is important for all children, including children with disabilities, should be developed across services. Second recommendation relates to the changing of perspectives and attitudes towards foster care and foster parents. There is a need to address the public and professional perception of the role of foster parents in particular. There is a need for recognition of the important and often sacrificial work of foster parents. Foster parents themselves are all too aware of the negative image they have, particularly in the media, and work needs to be done to address misconceptions about their motivation and lifestyle. Furthermore, greater recognition should be given to the work of foster parents who demonstrate the special competencies described previously. The positive impact of fostering should be communicated, not only the problems. Likewise, foster parents should be prepared according to the unavoidable stresses associated with their role. Through changing the narrative on fostering, foster parents will feel more comfortable in pursuing their role, and more suitable individuals will become foster parents. The third recommendation from this study relates to the development of services for effective support of foster parents. In light of the findings, it is understood that the strength of support foster parents receive directly impacts the care they are able to give. Foster parents need positive, cooperative relationships with social workers and other professionals and specialists. Improving relationships between these parties will result in better quality foster care. This involves creating opportunities for foster parents to have their voices heard and experience recognition for the meaningful contribution they are making to children's lives. Foster parents should be considered co-participants in the provision of care for children and should be asked about their professional developmental needs. Finally, ongoing psychological and emotional support is needed in a variety of forms to prevent burnout. Okay, and then just to close this presentation, I'm going to highlight to you some next steps from this research which may be of interest, and future outputs and materials which you'll be able to access in the coming weeks and months. So this presentation today is part of a range of activities related to communicating the messages of this research with a wider non-academic audience. The recording of this webinar will be available for sharing, along with a range of other outputs which are listed on the screen. If you would like to receive any of these outputs personally, please feel free to contact me on the email address provided. I'll also share in the comments section of this call a link to my research blog and my university profile where all these resources can be accessed as and when they are available. And finally, I would like to invite you to fill in a feedback form which I prepared. It's available in English and Bulgarian, and it's fine to respond in either language. This survey is basically about this presentation, what your thoughts about it, and I'll be really, really interested to hear your ideas. And I'll be pasting the link to that form in the comments section. I would like to thank you all for your attention. And on the last slide, I just have some selected references which link to what I've been talking about today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sarah. Now I will post the link. This would be the link to the poll. I would ask all in attendance to copy it. And after that, after we are over, you can fill in the poll. Also, towards the end of our meeting today, we will try to include an abridged version of this poll in order to get more feedback. Since Sarah is embarking upon a very important initiative, and we hope that this initiative would trigger broader discussion, not just among our professional community that we are here, that we are engaged with the professional aspects of foster care, but we hope this would provide for a broader audience. Now you have the floor to ask questions, opinions, experience. This was the main focus of interest of this meeting, to have an interactive discussion on the issues related to foster care of children with disabilities in this country. So colleagues, you have the floor. Now you can switch on your microphones. I'm sorry that I needed to switch some of your mics, but there were some noises. While the colleagues are thinking, I will ask a question, Sarah. What I think is very interesting is the expertise of foster parents, how important their skills are, the skills that they obtain, how important they are. They obtained in one way or another that go unrecognized, and how important they are for the quality of care. What do you think? You said how important is to develop services, helping services in support of foster parents, because obviously there's a big demand for specialized services. But what do you think? How important is to change the attitudes of the public, the way the public treats, regards foster parents in schools, if you want, people in the street, people in the stores, the entire public, I don't know whether you managed to get insights on this. So what do you think are the attitudes in Bulgaria on that? I don't know whether you already had the opportunity to get impressions. So is our society able to change its own attitudes towards care of children with disabilities, children that are already in the community?
So yeah, I would say from this research, I obviously have my own personal opinion, having spent time in Bulgaria, but from the perspective of this research, the attitudes of other people who were surrounding the foster families were very important in how long foster parents were able to continue fostering for, and also in how comfortable they felt. So just to give a few examples, one foster parent spoke about in their community, their neighbours were kind of throwing insults at them for having a child in their home who was not a blood relative, who was not related to them. And this was a big source of stress. But this particular foster parent just sort of, the way she described it, she just fixed her attention on helping this child who she was actually looking after, a very sick child, who during her care received a lot of medical attention. And she just focused on, my job is to love this child and to bring them up and rehabilitate them really as much as I can. But despite the fact that, we might look at this person and think what she's doing is very commendable, hard work, it's day in, day out, the people surrounding her weren't actually all supportive of that. And that was a hindering factor for her in her role, really. Another example on the opposite side is the way in which one of the participants in this study described the support she received from not only her husband, but also her biological children, her biological children's spouses, the grandparents, the way that fostering, while she was the primary foster parent, the employed foster parent, in order to continue doing this work, it needed to be not only her, it needed to be a community of people surrounding her. And that's what really equipped her to be able to foster. And this person was fostering for many years, and fostering children with very complex disabilities. But actually, for this participant, the child's disabilities were not a barrier to the care that she provided. The way in which she was able to work with the other services like you described, and people's negative opinions about whether this child should be in a family or not, those were the harder parts. It wasn't actually looking after the child that she found hard. It was dealing with bureaucracy, difficult relationships, people not really understanding the fact that she's working 24/7, she's a human being, not a building, not a service. So yeah, those are just sort of two thoughts on what you've said, really. So in light of that, it's hugely important to be developing services, particularly for foster parents. It's hugely important to for foster parents, when they embark on caring for disabled children, to really know there are people in the community to support me with this. And if I find something hard, the first response is not going to be send them back to the family type care centre. While the investment is continually going on in supporting the development of staff and professionals in family type care, not in family based care, where there's always that option for the child to go back to a group home instead of supporting the foster parent. That's where, from this research, I see one of the blocks are to the development of foster care, because there's always a fallback, there's always this alternative. And actually what we need to do is develop the services and support so much that foster parents don't need to be thinking that's the only way out. I hope that answers your question. I also wonder if anybody has any comments really on the practical implications of the recommendations that I talked about in their professional roles. I've just got another slide I can share. Or if anybody has any.
Thank you, Sarah. Please, colleagues, you have the floor. Hello, Elena Petkova. Can you hear me? Yes. First, let me say good work, Sarah. Good job for this great study. I think that you managed to get the main problems related to what foster care for children with disabilities are. Since very recently I had meetings with foster parents with a view to motivate them get children with disabilities in their care. And the problems are quite similar to what we heard now when what Sarah said. And there is another thing that is quite a big problem for biological parents with children with disabilities, namely the fact that they have regularly to go before an expert medical committee, medical evaluations for disability. This procedure is burdensome. Another thing that really shocked me is that foster care that take care of children with disabilities, they get 50% of the recognized disability benefits for children with disabilities. So I don't think they provide 50% less care, but they get 50% less the allowances. So another thing that you said, and quite openly you said it, what happens with foster children who do not get adopted, but because regretfully we do have such instances, and not, well, there are such cases. I met with foster parents who continue taking care of children with disabilities beyond the age of 18. And no more benefits, no more financial allowances for these children. They're not children, okay, anymore. No salary, but those parents, they just cannot give up those kids. This would break their heart. That's why they keep them instead of having them placed elsewhere. So they have a lot of difficulties. And what they do is they need support. And in my opinion, this is very important. What happens with those children with, especially with disabilities, who cannot live an independent life when they turn 18? So this was on my side. Yes, these are all very important problems that you mentioned, that you bring up. I don't know whether we have here representatives of the Social Assistance Agency or some other state institution, public institution, people who could also give in their 5 cents as experts. Daniela Simova, Chief Expert, Agency for Social Protection, Child Protection. Also, I was listening very carefully the presentation. I'm following the discussion too. Thank you for the invitation. For me, this was very interesting and continues to be very interesting. So what I have some numbers that are more up to date, although they do not vary that much from what you gave. For as of January this year, a total children in foster care are 1,551, and in these 169 with disabilities. I can give you breakdown by age from 0 to 3, 23 children with disabilities, 3 to 6, 30, 6 to 14, 75, and 14 to 18, 41. 169 children with disabilities as of January this year in foster care. Yes, the number is low. Yes, I agree that it's very difficult to take care of children with disabilities, but this is equally difficult for biological and foster families. And I think, yeah, this project is, we also, our agency takes part in projects. So, and also the condition, the age of the children, all those are factors. And there are no that much challenges with children with lower with smaller problems, but also it's very difficult when children have behavioral problems. And also the social workers under the project provides support. Also, the people from the agency, Child Protection Agency, provide support. They refer parents to services, and during also their ongoing trainings all the time on different topics. Also, guidelines are provided. Help groups, supervisions, consultations on use of social services, special education support, etc., for children. And all this is in accordance with the needs of the child and the needs for support to foster parents, So indeed, when there are many problems for foster parents, indeed, it's quite difficult for them, especially when there are behavioral problems and they give up. Another thing is on with the relations with biological parents. So these things are regulated, and also there are regular meetings with representatives of the biological family, and also yes, there are attempts to have unregulated meetings, but I think on these things are going according to the rules on that. Another thing, on the separation with children, yes, this is difficult. So they get support there, foster parents, So in every problem or difficulty when they arise, response is provided in terms of support. So I think everything that is possible with the available resources and services is done. Thank you.
If I may, I would like to ask you something. Could you tell us how in particular happens the recruitment of foster parents who are ready to care for children with disabilities? Are there any specific steps or a specific campaign that you organize in this regard? Or when a foster family is being registered as approved and registered, entered into the register, then they can share that they don't mind taking care of children with disabilities as well. When they apply in the same way. After that, they're being advised, trained, and everything that there is a organized procedure how to prepare the foster parents, but it's very important what's the attitude of the foster parents during the period of their training, whether they would share. So actually, this happens after the family has decided to become a foster family. After that, they decide whether to take care of children with disabilities or not. Do you, when you make campaigns to promote foster care, do you have specific activities for children, for people who are in doubt whether they will be able to cope with becoming a foster parents? In principle, when the foster family when a family decides to apply for becoming a foster parent, they go there and register, and then they get trained, they get investigated. This is a 4-month period, and they can ask anything that they might be interested in. They can ask, they're given the entire information, what support is available, and they're given the time to decide for themselves what type of child they can take care of, what age, with or without disability. However, but obviously there is a certain growth in the number of these families. There is certain shift in the attitude of foster parents in this respect, if I may so. Yes, but very, very little, unfortunately. Okay, thank you. May I add something? My name is Galina Bissett. I come from Equilibrium Association. I'm a colleague of Elena's. I would like to share 2 things. Some of the system barriers, because we have been working with foster families even before the foster care was regulated in Bulgaria. I've started working in 2002 and 2003 in the first pilot project. And what worries most the foster parents to become foster parents of children with disabilities, and it is being confirmed during my ongoing contacts with foster families, is the fact that in the small locations there is no fast access to medical care, and most of the foster families usually live in small locations, small settlements, because they have limited employment opportunities, and the GP is supposed goes to the village once a week, they wouldn't go, and the foster family has to transport the child to the closest town with medical help available, and if there is an emergency, you can imagine what happens. And from my personal experience with children with disabilities, transportation is not such an easy method. There are no special seats for children who are older, and the foster parents are really quite worried when it comes to emergency care. And second issue is the fact that there is a need to accompany the child in hospital. Some children need a lot of medical attention, diagnosis, regulation of therapy, which means quite a long period in the hospital, and usually the foster mother is the one that should stay with the child in the hospital. And I'm very well aware what is the attitude towards the accompanying persons in our hospitals, and this is quite a significant barrier. And the third problem is that they take part in the decisions of high medical risk for the life of the child. Birth parents who continue to have the parental rights don't always respond to taking part in the decision making for the medical intervention. For example, heart surgery, where the doctors say that it's very dangerous, and the burden of making the decision falls mainly on the foster parent, and it's very difficult to live with this responsibility. These are systematic issues that can be resolved and should not be left to the foster parents. And last, what works well from our experience, people who are already foster parents, maybe they're foster parents of typical children, what could make them take care of children with disabilities? Once they see the children, they usually say, oh, but the child is okay. So the solution is for them to personally see the children, the visual contact, and also the option when they see the child, if they're given very quickly the opportunity to be trained, to go through the training. But for some reason, this option is looked at as not being legitimate. While in many countries, this is used in trying to recruit people to foster children with disabilities, like playing video clips to them or seeing the children. And in all the cases when we use this experience, it has worked. Thank you, Gala. You have shared a very important issues, as we saw, from the real life. We have a long path to go in order to amend a lot of the regulations in the child protection field. Colleagues, you have the floor. Hello, I'm Kremena from Hope and Homes for Children. I fully agree. I thank Sarah. This was a wonderful presentation of this her research. Everything she said is something that we have been faced with during our work. Gala mentioned a lot of the problems as well. My work with children with disabilities as an expert. I'm a special pedagogue. I work with children with disabilities. And I am a parent of a child with disability, and I'm very well aware how difficult it is for a biological parent to raise a child with disability, and for a foster parent, it's even more complicated. What could be done in order to motivate more people to become foster parents of children with disabilities? I liked very much with opening children for efficient and effective support to foster parents, because there are services available, support services. Me as a parent, I know very well all the services available, but the fact that the foster parents are not aware of, not very knowledgeable about the particular disability, about the future of the child, what will happen with the child when the child grows, and what are the risks of taking care of this child in the family, is the first barrier to people becoming a foster parent. When they hear a frightening diagnosis with a very complicated medical terms, of course they will be afraid, but when they see the child, as Gala said, and don't think about the diagnosis, they say it's a child. It's the child that doesn't have any big problems. And what I want to add is that our organization, since 2012, has been providing support not only to biological families to keep their children with disabilities in the family, but we also provide support to foster families who care for children with disabilities. And I'm from Plovdiv, and the first parents to start caring for children with disabilities were here in Hisarya, and I remember how much support they needed in order to get the knowledge about, for example, what Down syndrome is, how they can socialize children, whether they should or should not send them to kindergarten, because they wonder very much what is right and what is wrong to do for the child with disability. And the other thing that we do is this first support. When you look after such child, you get, in order to get the support by the government, you have to wait for a month. And it happened that we had to buy for the family some equipment needed until they get the funding from the government. And without our support, they would have to find loans from somewhere to buy this thing. And our organization provides the support from the very first day, and let alone diapers. And if the foster family doesn't have any financial any money until they get their first salaries, this first period, and not knowing what is going to happen in the future is important. It's very important to know that there is somebody to back you and to support you and to tell you which institutions to go to, what you need to do. Ellie mentioned something which is very discriminatory. I'm a parent of such child, and the support that is provided, this support is provided for the child, but when the child is placed in foster families, the foster parents get 50%. It's a benefit. It's a support for the child, but if the child is placed in foster family, they get 50% only, which is an absurd. And if the child for some reason remains without parents and all, they would not get any of this support that is provided for their certified disability. Also, what needs to be changed are also the attitudes. We have to talk about it, and once the whole society managed to change the attitude towards people with disabilities and children with disabilities, maybe then the attitude towards the foster children with disabilities will be changed. The foster parents have no doubt that they need to care for these children, but they have a lot of fears. Thank you, Kramena.
I can just comment on your question in terms of, you know, how can we be motivating foster parents to foster children with disabilities and to accept them, and, you know, to change their profile to be a person who can accept these kinds of children. Just to link back to this, the findings of this study, really, in response to your question, that I didn't touch on this very much in the presentation, but I did say at the beginning that one of the questions I asked was, what motivated you to take on a disabled child? And the participants had quite varied introductions, let's say, to this type of care. Some participants were already foster parents when they were offered, would you like to take a disabled child, and encouraged by their social worker, whereas other people became foster parents of disabled children from the beginning. That was their original mission, so to speak, was to care for these types of children. But even though their introduction to fostering disabled children was quite different, what was very, very similar across the cases, which Galina has also mentioned, was when foster parents became exposed to children. And obviously there needs to be a very careful approach to this, which is not harmful to the child. But when foster parents became exposed to what this certain disability, which seems very complicated, very medicalized, and what that actually means. So not just on paper what this looks like, but what this actually means. When they were exposed to that, that is where this mind shift began to take place. So in some cases, when there was one foster parent, for example, who actually came across a child at risk in their community, and because they saw that child, they saw the child as a child, not as a list of diagnoses on paperwork. And this was very key to them fostering this child, because they basically recognized there's a child in need in my community, and I have the resources and availability to help this child. So this is something that's quite key, but the way in which this occurs in a safe practice, in a way that is not harmful for children, needs to be very carefully considered. And in addition to that, the way in which foster parents, and this was mentioned previously before as well, about the way that foster parents sign up and decide for themselves which children they feel equipped or ready to foster. What the role is of social workers around supporting foster parents to maybe think beyond what they initially are wanting to sign up for. If they're initially wanting to sign up for a baby girl, it can even be that specific, can't it? A baby girl age 0 to 2. But actually, what is the role of social workers in saying, we know that this is what you're thinking of. Have you thought about this? And yeah, what these conversations look like to having slightly different profiles.
Thank you, Sarah. I see in the chat a message from Maria Ivanova. She has a question. She is a mother of a child with disability, and she has organized a foundation for children with cerebral palsy. This is a new topic for me. I'm not sure, don't know very much the regulations and the laws. But how do you think, is it okay to organize self-help groups of comprising of both biological and foster parents of children with disabilities? To have mixed groups of both biological and foster parents.
So, I mean, to speak in terms of the findings of this research, what we see is that there are very common, there's commonalities between the way in which foster parents need to look after their children and the way that biological parents do too. Obviously, biological parents have some additional expertise in the fact that they have been with their child most likely from the first day they are born, whereas foster parents come to develop a relationship with that child sometime into the child's life, and they've not been present for perhaps some operations or some key developmental milestones, and so they don't necessarily have the full picture of the child's life. But in terms of the findings of this research, that when you compare the experiences from these foster parents with the experiences of biological parents in other studies, what's very similar is the way that they are able to use the resources available to them to develop the special competence needed to provide care for the child. And in terms of this finding in particular, it therefore would make sense to lead on to mixing biological and adoptive parents in a support group, because many of their experiences are going to be similar, and there may be many useful learning opportunities, especially if you are a foster parent who has fostered children with many different types of special needs. You may actually, and obviously here you're talking about cerebral palsy in particular, but a foster parent who's fostered children with many types of different special needs and disabilities has quite a broad, maybe broader perspective, which they can share their knowledge on. As likewise, a parent of a biological parent of a child, for example, here with cerebral palsy, may have very in-depth knowledge, which could help other parents, whether they're foster parents or adoptive parents. So this, from the findings of this research, your suggestion here seems to me to be a good one, to be sharing practice and experience amongst parents. I don't know if anybody else has other perspectives on this question, though. I'm just strictly speaking from the research side, but from the practitioner side, if anybody else has anything to add, please do.
May I add one more comment? Of course. I'm not going to discuss this because obviously it's natural that it should be done. It can be done. And if it's not done formally by the services, it's done in the community when people are neighbors or friends. But I would like to say something different that worries me very much related to foster care in Bulgaria. Sarah mentioned it, that foster parents, and especially those of children with disabilities, have no voice at all. They are not given any voice. They're not given the chance to speak, what they motivated them, what makes them continue, what is the satisfaction they feel. When a permission, when we had to ask for a permission for a foster parent to make a public statement, the Child Protection Department sends to the Agency for Social Assistance and then to the mayor, and we end up in a vicious circle and nothing happens, or if something happens, then we suffer criticism from all sorts of people. How dare this foster parent speak publicly? What happened to us with a foster parent who shared only 3 sentences and then he was blamed a lot. We need to do a national campaign with the participation of foster parents of children with disability, to hear for their voice, to give them a platform, because that's the most convincing when a foster parent of children with disabilities speak to other people. And it's the same about biological parents of children with disabilities. They are most convincing when telling other parents not to abandon their children. So I would urge all participants to organize the next national campaign with the participation of foster parents of children with disabilities to share their experience, because this would be the most convincing way to attract new foster parents or to shift the profile of the existing foster families, because it's not normal to have 500 approved foster families without children placed with them. This attitude towards foster parents is such, please excuse, is like sort of a place that depends on everybody else. Does not serve well the children with disability, with the children in Bulgaria in general and children with disabilities in particular. Thank you, Kala. I think this is a wonderful idea, and I believe it's very important to involve here the Agency for Social Assistance, and not for them to be involved, but to organize such a campaign with all the government institutions, the Ministry of Labor and Social Policy, because we know about the Foster Care Association. They try a lot, but we know what is the current attitude towards the NGO sector in general. So that is why it's very important for such a campaign to be organized by the government institutions, by the government in Bulgaria, to be accepted appropriately. We are coming to the end of our seminar, and this is the last opportunity to share, if somebody wants to share an opinion. Sarah, if you would like to add something before the end of the seminar, you have the floor.
Of course. Well, yeah, I'd just like to say thank you, everybody, for taking part in this, for listening to this presentation, and for getting involved in this discussion. And I hope it's not the end of this discussion, but just the beginning of some important work in developing foster care, and these issues that we've touched on around the psychological support, training, availability of support region by region, how this differs across Bulgaria is also something that needs to be addressed. The situation in Sofia is very different to the smaller towns and villages, as others have mentioned, but children with disabilities don't only live in the big cities, right? in terms of the motivation to be fostering children, what can we be doing about that? How can we be working together or working across services, supporting one another to make sure that children with disabilities are not left behind? And then this other topic that we've briefly discussed, what happens to children when they turn 18, when they've been in foster care but they're not prepared to live independently because of whatever additional needs they have? What are we doing about this when the system has been for so long based on the fact that children are in a form of residential care for children and then remain in a form of residential care for adults? Okay, now there's a different system where the family-based care is taking place for children, but when children are no longer children but still need more support, what is available for these young people as they enter adult life? And I think this topic in particular has begun to come up time and time again in the conversations I've been having recently. What happens post-18? And I would like to just let you know that in the next few weeks, we'll be recording a podcast where, again, with the Know-How Centre, where we'll be discussing these kind of issues in a little bit more depth, but talking a bit less about the research but more about the practical application of recommendations and findings in reality. And this topic about what happens post-18 will be one topic which is featuring there. So this will be interesting to explore this conversation in more detail. I'd just like to remind you, if you're available, to complete the longer survey, which has been sent in as a link in the chat, that has more opportunity for you to write your own responses. And these responses are quite important in terms of the different outputs that are going to come from this research as well, not only the academic materials, but different reports, videos. So whatever responses you're giving in this form, you can know that they will feature in some way informing what else comes from this research project. So thank you very much for your participation anyway, and thank you, Elitsa, for hosting the webinar today.
It was a great pleasure for me. Thank you, Sarah, for this wonderful presentation today. And I hope we will have a lot of meetings in the future, and we will work together in the future very hard to change the situation with the foster care for children with disabilities. Goodbye.